She didn't say goodbye to the money. She just let it go. It was 5:47 in the morning when Margaret Dawson's hands began to shake. Not from the cold, though the October air in Harlow Creek, Indiana, was sharp enough to bite through her wool coat. Number. Her hands were shaking because she was holding everything she had in the world. $317. 12 years of waking up before the sun. 12 years of selling tomatoes, sweet corn, and collard greens in a marketplace that smelled like rain and old wood. 12 years of saying, "Not yet," to every small luxury life had offered. All of it, folded neatly inside a brown envelope. And she was about to give it to a boy she had known for exactly 11 days. If you told her story to a stranger, they would stop you right there and say, "Why? Why would she do that?" And the answer, the full, heartbreaking, beautiful answer, is exactly what this story is about. Because what happened next, nobody in Harlow Creek was ready for it. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now, let's go back to that cold October morning. Margaret, everyone in town called her Maggie, was 63 years old. She had the kind of face that had clearly once been striking, with high cheekbones and dark, searching eyes that still held a quiet fire. But life had layered itself onto her, the deep crease between her brows, the slight hunch in her shoulders from years of lifting crates, the way she paused before she spoke, as if she was carefully choosing words the way she chose her ripest tomatoes, only offering what was truly good. She had been widowed 15 years ago when her husband, Robert, died of a heart attack at 51. No children. No living siblings. Just a small 2-bedroom house on the edge of town, a leaking roof that groaned with every rainstorm, and her stall at the Harlow Creek Farmers Market. The $317 in that envelope was what she called her roof fund. Every single dollar of it had been set aside, coin by coin, bill by bill, across more than a decade. She had a jar in her kitchen where she dropped whatever was left over after bills, sometimes 40 cents, sometimes $3. She never touched it. Not when the furnace broke in February. Not when her back went out and she missed 2 weeks of market. Not once. She had one dream, to fix that roof before the next bad winter hit. And then she met Daniel Brooks. He showed up at her stall on a Tuesday, not to buy vegetables. Maggie noticed that right away. His eyes weren't moving across her produce. They were moving across her face, the way a hungry person looks not at food, but at the person holding it, trying to calculate something. "How much for just 1 ear of corn?" he asked quietly. 50 cents, she said. He reached into his pocket slowly, the way people do when they already know what they're going to find. Very little. He pulled out $1 and handed it over. She gave him the corn and 2 quarters change. He looked at the quarters for a long moment, then very carefully placed them back on her table. "Keep it," he said. "You get up at 4 in the morning to be here. You deserve it." Maggie stared at him. In 30 years of selling at that market, no one had ever said that to her. "What's your name?" she asked. "Daniel," he said. "Daniel Brooks." "You from around here, Daniel?" "No, ma'am. I'm at Crestview College, junior year." He paused. "At least, I think so. I don't know how much longer I can stay." He didn't explain further. He thanked her and walked away. And Maggie watched him go. This young man with polished shoes that were worn thin at the heel, carrying 1 ear of corn like it was the most precious thing he owned. She thought about him the entire drive home. He came back the next Tuesday, and the one after that, always buying the smallest thing she had, always with careful, respectful words. On his fourth visit, she handed him a full bag of vegetables, tomatoes, peppers, a bunch of kale. "I can't pay for all that," he said, frowning. "Didn't ask you to," she said simply. He hesitated. Pride wrestled visibly across his face. Then he took the bag. "Thank you, Ms. Maggie." She waved him off like it was nothing, but she was already wondering more about him. On his sixth visit, she asked him to sit down on the old stool she kept behind her stall. She poured him coffee from her thermos. Black, no sugar. And she said, "Tell me what's really going on with you, Daniel." He looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at the coffee. And then, the way people do when they're tired of carrying something alone, he told her. He was a first-generation college student. His mother had raised him by herself in a 2-room apartment in Louisville after his father left when he was 4. She had worked double shifts at a nursing home for 18 years to make sure he had clothes, books, and enough food to focus on school. He had earned a partial scholarship to Crestview, worked 2 jobs, dishwasher at a campus cafeteria and overnight stocker at a grocery store, and kept his GPA at 3.7. Then his mother had a stroke. She survived, but her medical bills swallowed everything they had. Daniel had sent money home every month since. He'd fallen behind on his tuition. He owed the school $300. If he didn't pay it by Friday, he would be locked out of his classes. He would lose his enrollment. He would lose his scholarship. He would lose everything he and his mother had built, dollar by painful dollar, for 2 decades. $300, Maggie said softly when he finished. "Yes, ma'am." "Have you talked to the financial aid office?" 3 times. "They said there's nothing available. Not until the new semester." He smiled, but it was the saddest kind of smile. "By then, it won't matter." Maggie didn't say anything for a long time. She sat there watching the market around her, the early shoppers moving between stalls, a child pointing at a pumpkin, 2 old men arguing about the weather. Then she stood up, straightened her apron, and told Daniel she'd see him tomorrow. He left looking the way he came, tired, polite, and quietly drowning. That night, Maggie sat in her kitchen for a long time. The rain had started, a steady, determined rain that found every gap in her ceiling and dripped into the 6 pots she kept arranged across her floor for exactly this reason. She listened to the irregular percussion of water hitting metal. She looked at the tin box on the shelf above her refrigerator. She got up. She took it down. She opened it. $317. She sat back down and folded her hands on the table, and she heard, the way you hear things that aren't quite sounds but aren't quite memories either. She heard Robert's voice, her late husband, soft and certain, the way he always spoke when he wanted her to hear something real. "Kindness never dies, Maggie," he used to say. "It just changes form." She stared at the money. She counted it twice. Then she found a brown envelope in her kitchen drawer, slid the bills inside, and she placed it on the counter next to her keys so she would not lose her nerve in the morning. She did not sleep much that night. If you're still watching up to now, type "I'm still here" in the comment section. This story is just getting started. The next morning, Daniel arrived at the market at his usual time. Maggie was already set up, already surrounded by the smell of fresh vegetables and cool autumn air. She waited until a small gap in the foot traffic opened up. Then she walked around the front of her stall, looked him directly in the eyes, and pressed the envelope into his hands. "What is this?" he asked. $317, she said. "You need $300. The rest is for bus fare and something to eat." Daniel stared at her. Then he stared at the envelope. Then he looked back at her face as if he was waiting for the part where she explained that it was a joke, or a loan, or that there was a form to sign. "Ms. Maggie, don't," she said firmly. "Don't make it complicated. It's not complicated. This is... Where did you even..." He stopped. His voice had broken somewhere in the middle of the sentence. He pressed his lips together. I can't take this from you. You're not taking it. I'm giving it. She crossed her arms. There's a difference. Miss Maggie, this could be your savings. This could be— It is my savings, she said. She said it plainly, without drama. 12 years of it. Daniel went completely still. His eyes filled, instantly. The way eyes fill when the body decides that the heart has had enough and that it needs to release something right now. He turned his face away for a moment. When he turned back, 2 tears had already made their way down his cheeks, and he wasn't doing anything to stop them. 12 years, he repeated. His voice was barely a whisper. Finish what you started, Maggie said. She reached out and gently closed his fingers around the envelope. Don't look back. He opened his mouth, closed it. Then he pulled her into a hug, a sudden, fierce, grateful hug, and she let him, patting his back twice the way a mother would. I will pay you back, he said into her shoulder. Every dollar. I promise. You don't owe me a thing, she said. He pulled back, looked at her with something enormous in his eyes, gratitude and grief, and something that looked very much like resolve. I'll come back, he said. I know, she said. Though she didn't, really. But some things you say because they need to be said. He left that afternoon on the 3:15 bus back to Crestview College. And then the silence began. A week passed, then 2. Maggie told herself that was normal. The boy had classes, work, a life that needed rebuilding. A month passed. The first real snowfall came and went. Her roof leaked worse than ever that winter. She had to move her kitchen table to avoid the worst drip. Christmas came. No letter, no phone call, nothing. People began to talk. You heard what Maggie Dawson did, said Carol Haynes at the post office, loud enough for 3 people to hear. Gave a stranger her entire savings. Some college boy she barely knew. Could have been a scam artist. He never came back, someone confirmed at the hardware store. Not once. She's too trusting, that woman. Always has been. Since Robert died, she's got no one looking out for her. Old fool. Maggie heard all of it. Small towns don't keep secrets. They just tell them at lower volumes. She heard the whispers, and she went home. And she made herself dinner. And she didn't cry, because she had promised herself a long time ago that she would not let other people's doubt hollow her out. But some nights, the really dark ones, when the rain came through and the pots on the floor rang out their lonely song, doubt crept in anyway. Not loud, not accusatory, just a small, soft voice that said, what if they're right? She always answered it the same way. She would close her eyes, fold her hands, and say quietly to the empty kitchen, Robert, I did the right thing. I know I did. The silence always answered back. The years moved in that quiet way that years move when you're paying attention to survival. The farmer's market shrank as a big-box grocery store opened on Route 9. Vendors left one by one. First the flower stall, then the honey booth, then old Pete with his jams. Maggie stayed. She couldn't afford not to. Medical. Bills had come. A hip procedure she'd needed for 2 years before finally giving in. And between that and the roof, and the rising cost of just existing, the tin box above her refrigerator stayed empty. Then came the news that broke the last of the market's heart. A developer named Harmon Properties had filed papers to purchase the market grounds. They planned to build a strip mall. A town meeting was called. Maggie sat in the second row of the community center and listened to a man in a suit explain that the project would bring jobs and economic activity to Harlow Creek. Around her, people murmured. Some agreed. Some protested. But nobody had the power or the money to stop it. The vote was set for the following Thursday. Wednesday evening, Maggie drove home from her stall, one of the last ones left, and she sat in her car for a while before going inside. The market had been the shape of her life for 30 years. Without it, she didn't quite know what she would do or who she would be. She went inside, made tea, looked at the empty tin box, and then her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number. A Louisville area code. "Hello?" she answered. A long pause, then a voice, a man's voice, measured and warm and unmistakably familiar. "Ms. Maggie, it's Daniel. Daniel Brooks." The room seemed to tilt. She sat down slowly on the edge of her kitchen chair. "Daniel," she said. Just his name. Nothing else. "I've been looking for you," he said. "For years, Ms. Maggie. You have no idea. You don't have a bank account on record, no email address, no social media. I hired someone to find you. It took longer than it should have." "You hired someone," she repeated. "I needed to find you. I made you a promise." He paused. "I heard about the market, about the developer. I heard you might lose everything." His voice carried a weight that had not been there when he was 22. "I'm coming to Harlow Creek, Ms. Maggie. I'll be there tomorrow morning, before the vote." "Daniel," she started. "You told me not to look back," he said quietly. "I didn't. I kept going. And now I'm looking forward. Toward you. Please just be there tomorrow. Okay?" She couldn't speak for a moment. Her hand was pressed flat against her sternum, the way you hold yourself when something is happening inside you that is too large for the body to simply absorb. "Okay," she said finally. The next morning broke cold and gray over Harlow Creek. By the time Maggie arrived at the market, a small crowd had already gathered. Not shoppers, but townspeople who had heard something was happening without quite knowing what. They stood in clusters, hands in pockets, breath fogging in the air. At 9 o'clock, a black SUV turned onto Market Street, then another, then a third. They parked in a clean row. Doors opened. Men and women in suits stepped out, carrying folders and carrying themselves with the quiet authority of people who are used to walking into rooms and changing things. The crowd went still. And then the last door opened. He was taller than she remembered, or perhaps it was just the way he held himself now. He wore a dark navy coat, close-cropped hair, a face that had settled into the kind of quiet confidence that only comes from having survived things. He looked across the market, past the crowd, past the reporters who had somehow materialized, past all of it. He found her. Maggie was standing beside her stall, the same wooden table, the same wool coat, and when their eyes met across that distance, something passed between them that had no name. Recognition, yes, but more than that. The particular feeling of a story that had been left unfinished for a very long time, suddenly turning its last page. Daniel Brooks walked toward her. The crowd parted without being asked. He stopped in front of her. Up close, she could see things the distance had hidden. The gray at his temples, the tiredness behind the composure, and the emotion, visible and undefended, moving across his face like weather. "Ms. Maggie," he said. "Hello, Daniel," she said. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The crowd around them held its breath. Then Daniel turned to face the gathered townspeople, the council members, the reporters, the vendors, the neighbors, the skeptics, all of them. And he spoke. "My name is Daniel Brooks," he said, his voice carrying easily in the cold air. "I grew up poor in Louisville, Kentucky. I was the first person in my family to go to college. 8 years ago, I came within 48 hours of losing everything. My enrollment, my scholarship, my future. And on an October morning, a woman at this market gave me every dollar she had saved in 12 years. He paused. No contract. No conditions. She just believed in me, The silence in the crowd had a texture to it now. Dense, attentive. I graduated, he continued. I went on to build a company, and I built a foundation, the Brooks Scholarship Foundation, that has funded the education of over 200 first-generation college students in the last 4 years. He let that land. Every single one of those students exists because of what this woman did for me. Her $317 didn't just save one person, it multiplied. Someone in the crowd made a sound. Not quite a word, not quite a cry. Just a sound. Daniel reached inside his coat and produced a folder. He held it up. I've purchased the development rights to this market, he said. Not to build a strip mall. He looked directly at the man from Harmon Properties, who had gone very still. To restore it. Full renovation, covered stalls, proper lighting, a community space. This market will not close. It will be here for the next generation of Harlow Creek. The noise that came from the crowd then was, quiet it. And this market, he said. Quiet it. And this market, he said, will be officially renamed the Margaret Dawson Market. And I am today announcing the Margaret Dawson Education Fund, a scholarship for struggling students in this county, administered through my foundation. Named for the woman who proved to me that the poorest hands can hold the richest hearts. The applause came back twice as loud. Maggie stood absolutely still through all of it. Her face was doing something complicated, the way faces do when they are trying to process something that is too large to simply react to. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were bright. Daniel walked to her stall. He held out the folder. Inside was a deed. Her house, fully renovated, the roof repaired, paid in full. A monthly stipend, a letter of recognition from the State Education Board, and at the bottom, a check. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she closed the folder and handed it back to him. I don't want the check, she said. He blinked. Ms. Maggie. I didn't give to be paid back, she said firmly. That's not how it works. That's not why I did it. He looked at her for a long moment, and then something shifted in his face. Something released. He nodded slowly. Then let me give it to the fund, he said. She considered this. That, she said, I can live with. He almost smiled. Then he did. And then, as if he couldn't help it, as if 8 years had been working toward this single moment, he crouched slightly, not quite kneeling, but close enough, and he looked up at her. You didn't give me money, Ms. Maggie, he said. You gave me time. You gave me one more chance when I had run out of them. And you gave me belief, the kind of belief that stays with a person. That gets up with them in the morning. That says keep going, even when there's nothing left. His voice was steady but barely. I've been trying to figure out how you repay that, and I don't think you can. But you can pass it forward. He stood up. So that's what I'm going to do, for as long as I can. Maggie looked at him, this man who had once been a hollow-eyed boy with worn thin shoes and one ear of corn, and she felt something settle in her chest. The deep, specific peace of a person who trusted something in the dark and lived long enough to find out they were right. Your mother would be proud, she said softly. His throat moved. He nodded once. That was enough. In the weeks that followed, the renovation of the Margaret Dawson Market began. Maggie watched from her stall as workers installed new roof panels over the old wooden frames, and she laughed quietly to herself at the particular irony of that. Roofs, always roofs, the thing she could never quite fix by herself being fixed all around her now. Her own house was repaired that same month. She stood in her kitchen and listened to the rain and heard, for the first time in 15 years, nothing. No dripping. No percussion of water on metal. just the sound of rain being kept outside where it belonged. She sat down at her kitchen table and cried, not from sadness, from the accumulated weight of all the years she had held on, and the extraordinary relief of finally being allowed to set that weight down. The town changed, too, quietly, the way towns change when something true has been said out loud in the middle of them. The whispers stopped. Carol Haynes, who had called Maggie a fool at the post office 2 years ago, brought her a pie and didn't apologize but didn't need to. Children started saying hello to her at the market with a particular kind of respect, the kind that gets taught at home, deliberately. The Margaret Dawson Education Fund awarded its first scholarship 6 months later to a young woman from Harlow Creek, first in her family to go to college, working 2 jobs, 1 bad month away from losing her enrollment. Sound familiar? Maggie attended the ceremony. She sat in the front row, and when the young woman took the stage and looked out at the audience and said, "I want to thank the woman who made this possible," and found Maggie's face in the crowd, Maggie just nodded. That was all. A nod that said, "I see you. Keep going. Don't look back. The smallest seed becomes the tallest tree." On a quiet evening in late spring, Maggie sat on her front porch, the repaired porch, the solid porch, and watched the light change over the fields at the edge of town. She had a cup of tea. The air smelled like grass, and something warm and faintly like hope, if hope has a smell. She thought about Robert, about 12 years of dropping coins into a tin box, about a brown envelope, and a boy with worn thin shoes, and the particular courage it takes to receive something graciously when your pride would rather refuse it. She thought about what people had said. Old fool, scammed, too trusting. And she thought, maybe kindness is a kind of foolishness, the willingness to act as if the world is better than it has proven itself to be, to bet on a person when the odds are unclear, to give without a guarantee, to plant a seed in soil you'll never personally farm. But then again, 200 scholarships, 1 restored market, 1 dry house, 1 young woman on a stage, eyes shining, holding a future she almost didn't get. Maybe the fools are the ones who kept their money. What would you have done in Maggie's place? Would you have given everything you had to a stranger you barely knew? Do you believe that kindness always finds its way back? Or is it simply the most beautiful leap of faith there is? Tell us in the comments. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. And if this moved you, if you believe that the world still holds people like Maggie Dawson and people like Daniel Brooks, then subscribe to our channel for more timeless stories that remind us what truly matters. Hit the like button, leave a comment, and help us keep telling stories that are worth telling, because kindness never dies, it just changes form.